again, thank you very much for joining, everyone. This is going to be, I don't know if you are familiar with the format. It's going to be more or less a discussion, but the first, Prab, I'm gonna let Prab introduce himself shortly, is going to be giving a presentation. I don't know how many minutes it will be, 30, 40 minutes, I don't know. And then we'll have a discussion based on the presentation and if you have any other questions. So don't feel like it's a talk, it's more of a discussion kind of thing. And I hope it's going to be as active as possible. Feel free to interrupt, feel free to heckle, feel free to attack. And so far as the attack makes sense, I don't mind. Even if Prab minds, who cares? He's presenting a Ponzi around here, so it's okay. His yeah.
Whenever you said you can attack, I saw him. He's like, all right.
Yeah, he's like, I'm here. Yeah. So
I have my notes ready and everything.
The disclaimer, heads up on my end. Even though I did discuss this in a different setting when I was starting my podcast 2 years ago almost. I discussed blockchain and crypto with someone who was working in the field, but I don't know the least bit about any of this. So my questions are going to be naive, stupid on my end, at least, to try to understand a few things. But if you guys have better questions, and I'm almost sure you all do, so please feel free to jump in anytime you want. Also, another thing before we start, this is not a talk to convince anyone about absolutely anything, at least on my end. Like, the entire point of this discussion is to just explore a few topics, a few things, and that's basically it. But anyway, so I'll leave it to Prab. You can introduce yourself and feel free to just lead the discussion. Thanks.
Awesome.
Thank you, by the way, for agreeing to do this.
Yep. No, thank you for the opportunity. I think it helps me think about it better. So it was a dual benefit. I wouldn't have signed up if it was like a favor or something. I mean, this is helping me as well. But you kind of stole what I was going to say initially. So I'm not here to like convince anybody. I don't like talking about crypto. One thing I was curious about that you just mentioned, the previous conversation you had, because I think you've mentioned and Albert before in the classes and other previous discussions. I can just like go and talk about it, but maybe part of me is curious if there's a lesson or an insight anybody had from the last time, because that was something on my mind, right? Because I was like, I know these guys have discussed it before, and I don't want to show up and have them feel, hey, this is exactly what we talked about last time. So anybody have any
discussed what?
Blockchain and crypto and
no, I discussed personally with someone, like,
okay,
I don't even think anyone saw it because it was in Lebanese as well. So it's we have not done this. What we did was, by the way, Ann Albert did, I think, touch on this in an economics course that we did, but also, like, don't worry about it. So no, we're all here. Just like, consider that this is the first time we discussed this. So yeah.
Awesome. All right, so welcome everyone. My name is Prab. I'd like to, hopefully you can see my screen and hear me fine. As Decaf said, feel free to interrupt me. I'm not a crypto expert or anything like that. And so it may just be the case that someone here who's listening either right now or after happens to know 10 times more than me or 10,000 times more than me about crypto. And I'm open to that possibility. So if you hear me say something that's like crazy or wrong, jump in. Last week I said this, I aim for this to be more towards a stand-up comedy routine and discussion than me teaching anybody anything. I don't consider myself to be in a position to teach anybody anything in this regard anyway. And hopefully you can see my screen. If not, let me know. You should be seeing something called housekeeping now, okay? So I'll do some housekeeping before I even talk about myself. This is, again, I'm repeating some of the stuff Decaf already said. I am not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. Do your own research. Assume all of my research is wrong. Assume everything I'm going to talk about is wrong. I'm only talking about my own experience. I'll only be talking about high-level stuff. I'll go into some technicals, not that many technical stuff. I'll try and touch on it lightly. And then more of the time I want to spend listening to you guys and discussing rather than just me talking. One thing I also want to mention is that nothing I'm going to say here is new. One reason why I don't like talking about crypto is like the common comment I get back is like, whatever you're saying, this is thousands of years old. And yeah, it is. And let's talk about those things, you know? So I'm not here to say this is like world changing new technology. I'm biased, I'm opinionated. Intention is for me to understand, and hopefully maybe you can understand something. I'm not here to change your mind, but I'm open to you changing my mind. So if you have something that will change my mind, let's go. I'm not aiming to be right, but hopefully usefully wrong. If you end up leaving today thinking, hey, what an idiot, I know so much more than him, good, okay. So that's the housekeeping stuff. But I'll go into what even gives me the confidence to talk about this. My name is Prab Randhawa. I'm a Sikh. Why that matters here in this context is there's a duality in Sikhism, which is my religion, which is like the learner is the teacher and the teacher is the learner. There's other dualities, but this is one of them. So I've like self-learned myself crypto and self-taught myself coding, which gives me like an additional amount of arrogance at the same time of what do they call that concept where you're never convinced that you're good enough, because I'm always teaching myself it, right? So I'm never convinced I'm good enough, but at the same time I have this arrogance that I'm teaching myself. So that's where the Sikh part comes in. And I was born and raised in India, moved to the US in my teens, so I've lived half my life in both places. Went to school, did a bunch of corporate jobs. I did a bunch of blue collar jobs before that. I'll just rush past that, and that wasn't for me. I used to work in the oil refinery, and then I went to go work in the office, and that just drove me insane. And then COVID happened, and then I had to spend even more time on the computer. I'm the kind of guy that would rather be in the field with machines and people in the field. But in the office, it's like everybody's sitting in the office, and it's more about gossip and politics, and that's not for me. So I ended up leaving. But what I did with my time at Shell and Apple is I sold a bunch of technology to a couple of businesses. So I feel at home like talking to people about it, but I also have been taught that, you know, you shouldn't sell. You should just tell them what this is about and let them make their own decision. I can't code, I can't do math. I think that's important to mention because I'm here to tell you about crypto, so I'm not acting like a shadowy super coder or anything. I barely learned JavaScript, okay, earlier this year. So making my own website was a big accomplishment for me because I have no idea how to code, and I just, you know, one of the self-learning things. Let's see. My main area of expertise is probably oil and oil supply chains, and I'll maybe spend 60 seconds talking to you about that. And that's important because I think everybody has a default image in their mind. Everybody has a default point of view. Everybody has a default discipline. And as far as I am aware, mine is industrial machinery, because I have spent so long in oil refineries and not in the office, but out in the field with oil wells, that my first image, even when I think about crypto, is the oil molecule, is an oil drum, is the car engine, the F1 engine, if you want to be like really sleek about it. Here in America, I'd like prefer NASCAR, not to shit talk. But you know, those mechanical industrial things are my default point of view. So I'm an outsider to technology, even though when I go talk to people, everybody's like, dude, you're such a Black Mirror kind of guy. You know, you're like everything you talk about is so technological. And I'm like, I don't know, I feel in my mind, I'm more industrial than technological. My main thing that allowed me to escape the matrix is that because I used to work in the oil refinery, my job used to be to take care of inventory. So the computer thinks refineries and places and countries have X amount of oil, right? A version of that is you hear in the news, OPEC thinks America is shutting down oil, like X barrels a day, million barrels a day. And so that number is always off. In reality, it's something else. And then by the time it hits the news, the number is something else. So my main project within the oil industry was to find a better forecasting tool and to better match how much oil we actually have versus what the computer is saying. So I'm in this weird middle zone where I'm good at computers, but my real concern is, why does the computer never match what's happening in real life? That's just been my 10 years of, the computer's wrong. I'm on that side. So now I talk about crypto, and all of a sudden people default to me towards the side of, you're on the side of computers. And I'm like, no, fuck computers. They're always wrong, right? That's just my default point of view. So that's a little about me. Hopefully I made some sense there, but okay, let's switch to crypto. But then, yeah, exactly. I wanted to point this out exactly because of Mathematica, but even before we get to the crypto and Bitcoin and what it is and what I want to talk about here, I think a negative definition is probably better, at least to start with, because of what it isn't, okay? There was this early in crypto, maybe early 2010s. I've been into crypto since maybe the mid 2010s. I got into Bitcoin, and then 2017 I got really into Ethereum. But when I got into it, there was this phenomenon in crypto that code is law, that we can build logic and we can build the world in code, and then that's what's going to save us. And obviously that's not true, right? So what I want to talk about is a couple of things crypto isn't before I talk about what crypto is. What it isn't is code is law. It's not, let's put all our trust in math and we can just define the world with logic, and we can like somehow make the computers run the world and we don't need to worry about it. And just the computer will take care of it. That's not what it is. It's also not an infinite money machine. Many have tried, and many keep trying, and many will keep trying, because it's going to make sense why people do that. But it's good to right off the bat say that it's not an infinite money machine. It's not one true answer to all problems. I don't know if I want to use the word maximalist, but there's definitely people who put all of their hopes and dreams into new technologies, and crypto has its fair share. And people are like, this is going to be it, man. This is it. I don't believe that. That's not what it is. It's not all out libertarianism or socialism. So there's the extremes of crypto. There's two extremes, I feel. The libertarian dream, which is like I guess you can say it's right-wing coded, that everybody can become their own bank and everybody can be self-reliant and we don't need the government. I don't think it's that. Again, it goes back to the problems that aren't new. These are old problems, and people have had these visions for thousands of years that we can somehow make a libertarian society work. And I live in Texas. I'm surrounded by hardcore libertarians. So I'm coming from a place where people are gung-ho about this Bitcoin stuff, crypto stuff, because it enables economic empowerment. So you can take it to the nth degree and say, this is a libertarian technology, but then there's the other side of it. And it's equally not, if it's not libertarianism, it's equally not socialism. There's a side of crypto, and they call themselves public goods, or they call themselves EA, effective altruism, where their agenda is that we're going to save the world and everybody's going to be equal, and that's their read on technology. The point I'm trying to make here is that this technology is all encompassing, and the kind of people somehow, I think, end up revealing their political stances and where they're coming from when they discuss crypto. Because if somebody looks at crypto and the idea of an extreme libertarian society excites them, then that's what the change they're hoping for. But then there's the other aspect of crypto, which is social change in the sense of everybody's equal, and we can develop a society where we can enable like universal basic income. And the thing is, it can enable both those things. That's the thing. It's huge, and people call it money Legos sometimes, because you can make those type of money Legos and hope for a society that just works around that. But it's neither here nor there. It's not a way to make you rich overnight, but many people try. And there's a reason why they try, and we're going to get into that. So all of these things I'm listing, it's what crypto isn't to me. It may be to you. If you see something on here that you think crypto is, then that's fine. I'm just saying this is not what it is to me. Okay, so what is crypto? I want to pause and ask if someone has a first stab. I see you, Anne Albert. I see your smile.
Yeah, but the smile is mostly because I have no clue. Like the more the longer it takes, the less I know about crypto. It seems somehow. It's probably because I'm not really keeping up to date with it. And,
yeah,
there are a lot of things happening. I hear a couple of people saying different things, and it's money. It's not money. It's a store of value. It's not a store of value.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not too sure anymore what it is or what it might be.
Yeah.
I'm actually curious to first hear your opinion and then continue on that or anyone else's opinion here.
Sure.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
I know even less than Mahmoud and Albert, but I'm fascinated by the subject. My read on it is that it is a way to find trust in a fundamentally untrustworthy world.
Mm-hmm.
That's my kind of summation of what it might become. Not sure it is that right now, but that's what I'm kind of hopeful about.
Yeah.
I happen to think of it as a belief system rooted in, to your point, technological innovation and a new, different way to do things. I think the same question could be asked: what is fiat?
Yeah.
Right. So for me, it's really a fascinating time. It's like to me, it's the biggest thing possibly going on, for better and worse. That has you question current state.
Yes.
So, are we getting an NFT as a result of having attended this class?
Yes, absolutely. I'm
Quest.
so glad you asked. I was hoping someone asked. I didn't want to be the one pushing NFTs. Okay, I totally have a plan, and I'm happy to shell NFTs at the end. But to go back to the, I didn't want to just be the one, showing up saying I don't have anything to teach you and be like, hey, buy this NFT. But I'll get to that at the end.
Right.
But I think, unless anybody else has any input, all those definitions to me make sense, and I think it's also important to understand that it's a moving definition. It's just expanding to now it's in a place where I put crypto in quotation marks here because it barely makes sense to say crypto because people don't know what you mean. There's too many things. We just had basically a year's worth of classes on physics, and I enjoyed that. But there's one thing that was enlightening to me is how many dimensions there are in physics, and without sitting down and listening to Philippe talk, there's no way I would have known. And I think it reminds me that there's equally wide an array of dimensions in crypto. You could be talking about the political side, you could be talking about money, you could be talking about store of value, NFTs, or coordination mechanisms. It could be all of the above, and it is all of the above. There are some people that it makes them mad to hear so many definitions, and they want to stick to they want to stick to a shorter list of definitions. And then there's people who want to make the list of definitions even broader. And so it's definitely one of the most energetic spaces right now. But I'll go into my summary of what crypto is over time maybe, and then we'll leave it at a place where it makes a lot of sense for it to have a lot of different definitions. But we'll start with the ancient times. All crypto is basically the ability to, cryptography basically means to encode something for a select audience who can decode your information. I'm not keeping an eye on the chat, so stop me, okay? I'll keep looking at it here and there. But basically, cryptography is the ability to say something encoded that the intended party can decode. And if you think about how long that's been happening, it's been happening for thousands of years. I looked up on Wikipedia, there's like examples from 1900 BC, because of course there are, right? And that's the picture I put on the top right. People have been doing ciphers, and from the Indian history books, there's like the Kama Sutra came up where lovers have been, they're like, society doesn't want them to be lovers, and they like write like weird messages that only their lovers can understand. There's Roman armies that have a particular example that I was stunned by was that they'd write like messages on the slaves' heads, so you had to shave them, and then it's debatable whether cryptography or not, but the point is that it's a message intended for someone, and they have to have a way to then decrypt that, decode that. That became a little more sophisticated than the medieval times. I had a question here. Can I ask a question? Can I go back into like my student role here? I know there was a course, an entire month course on Arabic science or whatever. Is there a way for me to get access on that? I think it was in October, September. I missed that one. I wasn't here for that one. Do you know what I'm talking about?
On what?
Philippe did a course on focused on Arabic scholars. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Islamic philosophy. That was
Islamic philosophy. I'm sorry.
Islamic.
Yeah, that was Hani Hassan, not Philippe. Philippe gave only one session, but the bulk of the lectures were given by Hani. Yeah.
Yes. So my curiosity, we should do that as an NFT, because I'm like, how do I get access? I missed out on that. Okay, so how do I get access to that? That's my question.
Well, I'll send you the link.
Okay, perfect, awesome. See, I got something out of this.
And Leo is saying, at the most basic level, it's a way to prevent double expenditure of money.
Yes. And it got to that in the, I want to say in the mid 80s to the 90s, right? Because before that, people were, thanks, Luca. People were, before the 80s, in the medieval times, there was statistical analysis going on in the Arabic world. Something I remember Decap mentioning in the language course is there's like these 3-digit Arabic meanings, and words have 3-digit meanings, and that's like almost a statistical analysis of language. And that's also an example of some cryptography. There's cryptography in the political and the religious sense. There's Sufi saints in India, and their poetry is so cryptic that you can't, I love it, because you can't tell if they're talking about God or alcohol or like their lovers. And it's amazing, because that's what makes it amazing, because no matter who wants to look at it like that, that's what they read. So it's intended for the user and how they decode it. So it's like multidimensional. But in context of modern crypto, maybe there's more interesting stuff in the ancient and medieval times that I'm skipping past. But in the modern times, crypto is just encryption, especially after the internet age. Before the internet, it was wartime. There's a Benedict Cumberbatch movie, The Imitation Game. It's about cryptography. He's like playing Alan Turing. Excellent movie, I think. But even in more recent times, it's just online shopping, right? In the 90s, I remember the first time I bought a t-shirt on the internet, and people were scared of putting their credit card or banking information online, right? That was a huge concern, and it should be a concern. Why should I put my credit card information on a random website? But we don't have a concern now, because encryption is a thing, right? Now, Elon Musk is pushing for encryption on Twitter DMs and all of that stuff. So those are modern examples. But there was a big shift in 1982 when this person called Leslie Lamport, they wrote a paper called The Byzantine Generals Problem. You'll hear this all the time. You'll hear the Byzantine Generals Problem all the time. So I want to explain maybe a few quick things about it. What the Byzantine Generals Problem is, it sounds very fancy and philosophical. It's trying to solve a computer network's reliability problem. So in the oil field, what happens is oil refineries, when you turn on an oil refinery, it's supposed to keep going, right? When it fails, it costs you money. In computer networks, when you run a Twitter or Instagram, it's supposed to just keep going. If it shuts down, productivity loss happens. People lose tons and tons of money. So people have been studying computer networks, more specifically distributed networks, and how to keep them running. In one word, that's called reliability. So Leslie Lamport, this Byzantine Generals Problem, was a computer reliability problem. And what he was trying to do is to say the setup he had was, let's say there's lieutenants and generals, and they're supposed to coordinate attacking on an enemy. This is just an analogy, but really he's talking about computer networks. And the assumption is that some of the generals and lieutenants are loyal and some are traitors. So how do you manage a network of an army and coordinate them right in the scenario where you don't know how many of them are traders, right? So this problem, and you can read the paper, I'll put the link in the Discord and stuff. This problem, he analyzed in a couple of different ways, whether the messages are, or where they have the lieutenants and the generals have messengers between them. There's many details to this. He analyzed how many generals does it take and how many traders does it take. This is called the fault tolerance. What kind of messages are they sending between each other? Are they oral or are they signed? Are they sealed? So the other party knows this is encryption again. And so he does a bunch of complicated math to come up with a solution to the Byzantine generals problem. People think Satoshi Nakamoto solved the Byzantine generals problem. It was Leslie Lamport. He solved the Byzantine generals problem, still alive. I think he has a bunch of papers at Microsoft and stuff like that. A huge breakthrough, because what it allowed you to do is run a computer network in the face of an attack, in the face of an X percentage of the network can be a trader, and the network keeps running, okay? And so the use case for this in the 80s and the 90s was what we use in daily life. Twitch right now, Zoom, all of these computers are running on a distributed network of computers where part of the network can fail and the app will keep running, the network will keep running. In the oil world, there's a very popular example about airline pilots where this is computer networks and it's informational stuff, right? But if in the physical world, let's say a part of the airplane fails in midair, the rest of the machines have to keep operating, right? So they, in the specific part that has failed in this example, he'd be a trader. So he's sending the part is sending mixed messages to different parts of the airplane, and the rest of the airplane still has to keep functioning. So it has uses, you know, outside of computer networks. And then in 1993, I think I got the name of this paper wrong, by the way, so ignore it. But Mina Noir and Cynthia Dwork, they had another idea called denial of service attacks. This was, the use case was email spam. What this did was they suggested that every time you send an email, it didn't end up happening, but they suggested every time you send an email, you should burn a little electricity that costs you money, costs you like a penny or something. What that does is, like, you can send emails to your friends and you can spend a couple of pennies, but it deters someone from sending email spam to 1 million people, because then they rack up a bill the more they do it, right? This was the use case. So now in the 80s and the 90s, there was this cypherpunk moment that you'll read a lot about online. The cypherpunks, what they wanted to do is they wanted to take the Byzantine generals problem and they wanted to take the Mina Noir denial of service attacks solution to come up with a way to have a money where nobody has a higher authority on the monetary system, which is a noble goal. You know, like, obviously you can imagine a bunch of people wanting such a money, and that's the innovation Satoshi Nakamoto did. Satoshi Nakamoto did not solve the Byzantine generals problem. Satoshi Nakamoto did not come up with the proof of work idea, which is the denial of service attacks. Satoshi Nakamoto introduced something called crypto economics, and it's revolutionary in its own way, but it's putting the Leslie Lamport and Mina Noir ideas together to say, and you can read the Bitcoin white paper, it goes into many details of this, to say, in a network where there's X percentage of traders, you should still be able to coordinate based on the fact that you're incentivizing them with some kind of coin. And nobody has higher authority on those coins than anybody else. It's just an incentive mechanism. And I know this is like super abstract. This is the most technical it'll get. It's gonna get funny again in a little bit, I promise. But that's what Satoshi Nakamoto did. He took Leslie Lamport's idea and he took the denial of service attacks idea. He created a monetary use case to say it's a peer-to-peer electronic cash system running on a network of nodes where X percent of nodes can go down, Y percent of the nodes can, I zoomed as gender. Y percent of the nodes can be traders, and the network keeps going because the players in it are economically incentivized. There was one more innovation that he did. Before Satoshi Nakamoto, There's many innovations they did. Well, one more I want to point out here. There's before Satoshi Nakamoto, in Leslie Lamport's and Mina Noir's point of view, you could still have this network with X% traders that keeps running as long as you know who the computers in the networks are. Satoshi Nakamoto, because of this economic incentivization, in his new framework, you don't have to know who the networks nodes in the computer are. That's huge, right? But it slows down the network. That's a result. That's an end result of that. But it's the and I'll talk more about this in the next slide. But the main innovation was that you just went from a Twitter or a Twitch or a Microsoft or Apple or a Google saying we have 10,000 servers around the world, and yeah, X% of the network can go down and our service will keep running. Yes, but Satoshi Nakamoto said you can do the same thing without knowing who those computers are, because they're economically incentivized. They're economically incentivized by this thing he called Bitcoin. And for a long time, he was, the Bitcoin was like almost next to free to burn, because it was running that denial of service attack idea where you can burn a penny worth of thing, and that's proof that you spent some, power. You spent some work. That's proof of work. And then things got crazy. Now it's like worth, I don't know, 16,000, 17,000, whatever it is worth. I'll pause here and say one thing in context of scams, because I love scams. I'm attracted to scams. It's so interesting, But because of the dynamic that Satoshi Nakamoto did, it doesn't stop anybody else from going around and deploying the same dynamic. That's why there's like 10,000 coins, people saying, oh yeah, I also have a network that doesn't go down. But except for BTC, it's this FTT coin, or it's like Philo coin, whatever, right? It's some coin, and it's running on a network, and X% of network can go down, and the players are economically, there's nothing stopping from other people to copy this dynamic, and that's why there are so many scams. But between the scams, among the scams, every few so often, it took 6 years, but this Russian-Canadian gentleman, Vitalik Buterin, very smart. He took the same idea of Satoshi Nakamoto, whose intention was to create a peer-to-peer cash. This guy, Vitalik, who made Ethereum, and not everybody's convinced of Ethereum, and that's fine. But his vision was, why can't we also do that with computation power? Why can't we just run apps on that? Why can't we make it a general purpose, instead of just having the purpose of it be money or a peer-to-peer cash? Why can we not run the same network that is incentivized for people to keep it safe and secure, and X% of the network can go down and it's going to keep running? But instead of running money, it's running applications. Some people like that, some don't. Some think that can be done on an existing Microsoft or Google network, and some don't, and that's up to it. But that was his vision. Okay. One last thing I want to talk about here is Nassim Taleb, and because I truly believe they fall in the same category. They're about the same thing. But Nassim's point of view on this whole timeline that I'm pointing out here is that, yeah, you can have a network. Yeah, you can incentivize people to keep the network up. Yeah, X% of the network can go down and it's going to keep running. But none of that means that the token has value. None of that means that the token has value. And, he may have a point. Who knows? Time will tell. But he's thinking about the same thing from a mathematical perspective. He's questioning, and it's kind of good that that happened, because everybody's so gung-ho about it. Everybody's so hyped about it. I was kind of glad to see some guy show up and say, it's not all that, because everybody was like, oh my God, this is the end of the world. This is fucking awesome. And he came about and he's like, well, Bitcoin is worth zero. Mixed reactions there. But it's worth reading, because he's in the face of all this timeline that I'm pointing out. He's the one coming in and saying, all that's valid, but that's not to say that the currency or the economic incentive has to have real world value. And he may have a point. I don't know. I'll pause and ask if anybody else has any thoughts before moving to the next slide.
I guess the one thing that I associate with crypto,
yep,
is that it is software dominant. So it removes generally, and it was particularly when you speak to Bitcoin, right? There's a big difference, and I think crypto gives crypto a bad name.
Yeah.
But there is, I mean, man, Bitcoin, right there. It's. I'd love to hear your thoughts and where we're going, but how is it not a perfect protocol and technological project that removes people from technology, policy decisions, self-interests? And I asked that, of course, and knowing that there are some whales that got in early and benefit more than the altruistic promise of democratized economy.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the only issue that I have with kind of like, I think when I saw him make the pivot, I thought it was because he didn't view, he came to the conclusion that it wasn't a currency, I believe was his tweet, something to that effect.
Yeah.
When in fact it's a currency if enough people accept it to be a currency.
Yes.
Anyway, I do believe that was his tweet because I'm a big fan, but I don't necessarily.
Yeah. I think as Decaf pointed out, his paper is strictly from a financial perspective. And I'd like to, there's an article called The Tale of Two Talebs or something. I'm not sure if I've read it, but I like the headline. Because the two Talebs, in my point of view, in my world, there's one Taleb that you meet in his papers, and he is extremely sharp and very well defined, and you have to know exactly what he's talking about. And there's no two ways about it. And then there's the cryptic Taleb you meet on Twitter, where he says something and 6 people read it 6 different ways, right? And he has fun with it, in my opinion. And I love following the guy because of this, right? But in the paper, the Bitcoin paper, he's being extremely sharply surgical about the finance aspect of Bitcoin. And so I think I could be eating my words here a little bit later, but in my opinion, he's not pointing out fallacies in the way you pointed out Bitcoin. I think, in fact, he even agrees with that coordination mechanism. He agrees with the innovation, but what he's pointing out is the very incredibly thin and sharp financial side of Bitcoin, where he's saying there's no absorbing barrier. He's studying it for fragility, where the players involved, where I'm pointing out in the computer network, according to him, in a black swan event or a tail event, as he calls it, there's nothing stopping from the entire network to go down. And so in his opinion, when that happens, and he's not predicting when it'll happen, he doesn't do that with most things, but he's saying when something like that happens, there won't be an absorbing barrier and it's going to go to zero. And he's pointing to the fact that it's going to happen sooner or later, tomorrow, 100 years from now. Something's going to happen that's going to disincentivize everybody in the network to leave, or incentivize them to leave. I think that's the way I read it. I'd be curious if anybody else has any opinions.
That's a long time ago that I read it, but if I'm not mistaken, I think he also mentions like the very fact that it's not being used as money ensures that there is no absorbing barrier. Like suppose everything or a lot of things would be paid in Bitcoin, or government salaries would be paid in Bitcoin, for instance, then there would not really be a possibility for such a black swan event, or at least not the consequences of that black swan event getting the value to zero. But because it is not used like that, there is no such thing that can prevent that, which I think is a fair point, and of course doesn't mean that fundamentally there could not be such a thing as crypto money. But it really does depend on whether it will actually be used and whether people believe it will be used.
I think the only counter to that the use is like in the US, you're in theory disincentivized, that's the word, from actually using it, right? Because you're creating a taxable event. So I can't even imagine a world where I'm going to use my Bitcoin today to buy a cup of coffee, where people reference. The other point that I'm making, I think it's relative to the slide that we're on, right? Because we're going from ancient times to medieval to modern. I mean, in the span of our history, we're so early in this. Crypto journey. And the fact that today, right, you know, what Jack Mallers does with Strike to make it easier to move worldwide money and use. I don't know if the expectations aren't baked to perfection sometimes. Is my only question as it relates to actual use cases.
Yeah, there's one thing that I'm thinking of hearing both of you talk, that, you know, it's not being used as cash for tax reasons and whatever else, but I think that's also a point of tension between what people call crypto and what people call Bitcoin, right? Because once the dynamic is defined and out there, there's other people coming out and saying Ethereum is also money. There's an entire section of Ethereum that's like gung-ho about it being sound money or something they call it, right? And so to a person that is new or out on the outside, they come in and ask, well, what's the difference between Bitcoin and crypto? And I'm thinking of the meme where you know, someone asks, are you two friends? And crypto people are like, yeah, we're friends with Bitcoin people. And Bitcoin people are like, no, we're not friends with these people, right? Because these people want to have another version of money, and Bitcoin is the money to them. And there's, you know, multiple reasons for that. And we can probably have an entire hour-long discussion just on that. But that's also what I'm thinking of, that it's not being used as cash because there's other dynamics and other chains coming in and claiming that they are also cash. So it makes the waters even muddier. Okay, I see Rudy just joined. Hey Rudy, if you jump in.
Hey, sorry guys. You know, I thought 7 is our normal time. You guys actually, you know, confused me completely.
There's a
Sorry
game.
about this.
There's a game at 8, that's why.
Oh man, you know, everything bows to the World Cup. I see.
Yes.
But I don't think you've missed anything. Everything I've just talked about is just briefing everyone a very brief history of cryptography and where we are today with Satoshi and Ethereum and Nassim Taleb's criticism. So I was cryptic myself when I wrote the description for this talk or discussion, because I wrote these words and I very carefully chose them, right? Transform, because most people, I was aware of the dynamic where people come at me and like, you are the guy selling crypto and you are the guy, you know, on the computer side. And as I pointed out when I spoke about me, I'm the guy saying computers are full of shit, right? But because I know people say that to me, I was like, I use these words called transform identity or reshaping markets and altering the concept of ownership. Almost expect this like a bait, you know. I'm just expecting people to come at me, and that didn't happen. I was kind of disappointed. But I want to go zoom in a little more about what I said in the description, so I can maybe set the record straight, and we can leave laughing at me one more time for writing such a thing. Also, side note, I think I wrote that before the whole FTX headlines hit. So I wrote it and sent it to Decaf, and I think a couple of days later, a week later, the whole FTX thing came out, and it had me thinking, I'm like, should I change this? I sound like such a pro crypto person here. So it had another effect. But let's, somebody mentioned in the chat, there's the pre-Satoshi and post-Satoshi comparison they liked. So I have another one in concept of identity. I think one innovation that Satoshi did, because distributed computing was already a thing in the 80s. People already had the mindset of proof of work and, you know, burning electricity to show someone that they did some work before they send a transaction, or in that case, an email. But like I said, one big innovation that Satoshi did is that instead of knowing who all the computers are in the network, you don't have to know who they are, and they can X percent of them can be traders, and because they're economically incentivized, things would work out. So I wanted to zoom in that when I said it's transforming identity, crypto is transforming identity, that's specifically what I mean. I mean that the identity of the network devices goes from all known and trusted to you don't have to know who the network is being run by, and you don't have to trust who the computers in the network are, because they're economically incentivized. So it's much more of a literal transformation than you'd see something like in The Office, where, you know, I don't know if everybody watches The Office here, where they show up to the office and Dwight's playing this game where he's playing in like another life in the computer, and that's his second identity. And I wanted people to have that point of view and show up here and say, you know, realize it's more of a literal literal transformation in identity than become somebody else and go into the computer and wear VR goggles or something like that. So it's a literal transformation in identity where you go from the network players being known to some of the players are unknown and even anonymous, and it works fine because they're being paid in BTC. So that's me saying it's transformed identity. Another one I said, because I wanted to like tease about NFTs, is it's altering the concept of ownership. So I'll pause again. Thoughts on NFTs here? Any good or bad? You can bash them.
Can you go back to the last slide for just one quick sec?
Sure. Any questions?
Well, besides identity, I also think of it economically, right? Because in your left, you've seen on Twitter, right, what Apple's doing in their app store and how extractive they are.
Yeah.
And certainly in the right hand side of the world, it's generally there's less friction and drag and cost and
another
control.
way to another short way to think about, and hopefully Telmo listens to this after, because I think he pointed out something very cool in Discord. Another difference is that in the right, everybody has the access to go become a root user of the blockchain. They don't have to, right? But on the left, if there's a Twitter, if there's an Apple, some people by definition have better rights to the system than most people. And Google's whole thing was, don't do evil for like 20 years. Yeah, don't do evil, but you still have the key, right? So you can do evil. You're just saying we're not going to do it, right? But in crypto, everybody's a root user, or at least they have the option to. You don't have to become a root user, but nobody's, it's this thing called permissionlessness. Nobody's stopping you to go to start run the node, and then you just have the entire copy of the blockchain. Nobody has any more privilege than you. And it's, it's a higher order discussion of who owns most of the network and whether or not that's a good thing or not. But the way the network is designed, nobody's stopping you from becoming a root user. That's definitely not the case with Twitter. That's definitely not the case with YouTube. Any other platform, somebody has a key that opens more doors than the key you have. But that's not the case in crypto. Everybody's keys work the same way.
Hey, Prab, can I
yes.
just very quickly, when you mention crypto, you mean Bitcoin, right? In this case, or do you talk about crypto in general? Because what you just said is definitely the case with Bitcoin, and that's why many people like it. But it's probably not the case for many other cryptocurrencies, right? So this decentralized versus centralized is a huge distinction here, and I completely agree with you saying. But it just applies to certain cryptos.
Absolutely. So I'll go back here, and what Rudy's talking about is the difference between 2008 and 2014, right? So Rudy, before you jumped in, I was telling them about like the difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum, and what Ethereum's trying to do is make like a world computer and run programs on the same thing. You lose something when you try to do that, and that's what Rudy's pointing at. When you make this distributed network do more stuff, you lose some decentralization, right? And so what I'm pointing out in the identity case here, where some part of the network can be unknown and it works just fine, that's, yes, true for Bitcoin. But when other chains are going around saying we're the same as Bitcoin, they're not, because it's the architectural difference, and they know who the players are. It's not an open system, and they go around saying it is, but in that sense, Bitcoin is the true decentralized system. Absolutely.
The one other thing related to that slide too is, right, the on the right hand side, on the left hand side, you don't own your data. The right hand side, you do. Big,
So
big. On this slide, yeah, on the left hand side, you don't own your data.
yes,
Corporations own your data. On the right hand side, you own your data.
right. There's downsides to that too. Like the way it exists, you do own your data. The way it exists right now is everybody can just go see it. Like even though you own it.
Yep.
If I know your address, I can just go and see it, and that's not the case in the closed garden or whatever they call it on the left, where even though you don't own it, it's still hidden away from the rest of the world to go look up my name and see exactly what I own and exactly how much I have. Yep.
Although we do see some of that more and more, even in the left-hand column, right? I mean, if you give me your address, I'm like, I go to Zillow, I'm like, oh, what did he buy the house for? Is he renting? Did he own? Well, he paid that much, right?
Yeah,
So I mean, we're on the left-hand side, that transparency is increasing, but
yeah.
yeah,
One
you're
of
right.
one of the other things I do besides crypto is like consulting work. And every time I'm talking to a new person, I totally stalk them. I'll look up what are their interests, and there's nothing to hide. It's like it's all there on Google, man. I'm not trying to do like FBI work. It's just there. Okay, so let's talk about ownership. That's the other thing I said. I said transform identity, and it alters ownership. So how does it alter ownership? And to Rudy's point, this is more true for Bitcoin than it is for any other chain. But I'll go back to my oil roots and discuss this in terms of oil barrel. So let's pretend, I don't know why, but let's pretend you need an oil barrel. All right, I need an oil barrel. Everybody needs one oil barrel. And you go to your local oil company and you say, can I get one oil barrel, please? Halliburton or Shell or Exxon, whoever, right? You say, and they give you an oil barrel and they give you some sort of an invoice and receipt to it. So what does that, and it doesn't have to be an oil barrel. It could be like a sneaker. It could be any milk, anything. You get a receipt saying you purchased this item from us, or it could be the bank, and you could go to the bank and say, can you show me how much money I have? And they print you a receipt, saying how much money you have. What does that receipt really mean? The receipt means that the bank has a master copy of what just happened. This is what I was pointing out earlier, what I used to do in the oil industry. The oil company has a master copy, or the country has a master copy of how much oil they have. They give you a barrel of oil. They give you a receipt that says, now this barrel of oil is yours. But who's really saying that? Who's really saying it's yours? You could say that all day long, but it has to transfer it from them to you, right? So it's, again, the problem of some decentralization. Somebody has higher authority on what just happened than you, right? There's scholars in the crypto world that talk about it in a very edgy way, in terms of how much money you have in your bank. The bank can just change that number, and you have no way to go and have more rights than them, right? But because in the crypto world, it's the network that's running the state. It's not a party in the middle that's coordinating who owns what. It's a decentralized database. And there's reasons oil companies don't want to do this, because it's the same reason that if they put it on the blockchain, then everybody can just see who bought the barrel of oil from who, and then who is it right now with. Nobody has any higher authority to go just delete the fact that you got an oil barrel, right? This, again, could work for many other things. It doesn't have to be an oil barrel. But the receipt here, the receipt is the NFT. One thing I wanted to point out here is that people debate all day long, what is NFTs? And people point out that the NFT isn't the actual image, it's a hash record, Yeah, agreed, full on, right? The NFT is the actual receipt, but who is the receipt between? It's not between you and a higher party. It's not between you and someone who has more rights than you, right? It's a small change, and maybe going back to Nassim Taleb's criticism, it's not worth money at all, and forget, $500,000 monkey pictures. But the change that's happening in the ownership is that the master record of what you own isn't in the hands of a party that can just go delete it. Now, do they delete it? Most of the time, it doesn't happen. Like, most people aren't Andrew Tate or Donald Trump. Those are Kanye West. Those are the people you hear that, oh, Chase just got rid of his money, closed his bank account. Most of us, none of that will happen in our lives. But it's an innovation that allows an alternative in which a second person does not have a higher authority or right than you to go change what happened in the receipt. I have one NFT. I should have made more. I wasn't expecting this many people show up. I have an NFT that I'll go over at the end. My money was gone, but that's a different thing. You wanna talk about it, or I should just go on? No? Okay. So the last thing I mentioned is reshaping markets. This is all sitting on top of the innovation of Satoshi Nakamoto, where instead of a known number of players running the network, it can be an unknown number of players. And because they're economically incentivized, the network keeps running even if X% of the network is traders. So one simple example is, it doesn't have to be a bank. It could be like FTX or crypto.com. Same thing. They have a higher authority on your money. And that, one thing that's crazy right now that's happening with this whole FTX situation is that people trusted the Sam Bankman guy and his FTT token, and they thought they were buying Bitcoin, and it turned out that they didn't have any Bitcoin on their balance sheet. They didn't have any Bitcoin, and they were just like giving them receipts that you have Bitcoin. That's the dark example I'm giving, where your bank could be saying, yeah, you have your money, yeah, you have your money, and the day you show up and they're like, yeah, those receipts were just made up, right? So that's the way a centralized finance world works. This is not to say centralized finance is bad. In fact, when it comes to finance, I'll keep going back to the surgical version of Nassim Taleb. Listen to people like him. They've been in the finance game for so long. You don't want to do something that's against what they recommend, right? You want to listen to the people that are successful in the old world and the legacy markets. That's not to say that the new alternative is not innovative. It's innovative because the analogy I like to think about, I think of them like vending machines. So instead of going to the bank, and this, I'm breaking my earlier assumption of saying I don't believe in code is law, but I kind of do here, is instead of going to the bank and saying, can I get Indian rupees for this like $100 or something, instead I'm going to this vending machine like app. There's a bunch of them. There's Uniswap, there's Aave, I'm sure there's a Bitcoin version of this. And basically it's a smart contract that you're dealing with instead of an institution. So the contract itself is dumb. I attended Real World Risk Institute last year, and I couldn't stop laughing. Nassim Taleb said the thing about smart contracts is they're neither smart nor contracts, and he's right. They're vending machines. They're stupid, right? They're meant to do something, and as long as the logic is sound, you put in the coin and it does what it's supposed to do. So in this case, in a decentralized finance world, I'd walk into one of these vending machines and say, hey, can I exchange one USD or one BTC for ETH? Now, people don't want to do that. That's another thing. But the fact is that the vending machine itself has way less authority over me than a bank would, right? And maybe it could be that whoever coded the vending machine, whoever coded the smart contract messed up, and it's not as good as they're going around saying it is. And that's always a possibility. But I'm not depending on another person, another institution. I'm depending on this code that hopefully over time, even if it has flaws, fixes itself. So that's how it's reshaping markets. This is the one that I'm least convinced about, because everything that a decentralized finance application does, a centralized finance application also does. So it's something that you have to just go and experience rather than you can get in abstraction. But I want to ask if anybody has experience in DeFi. They call this DeFi, decentralized finance. Anybody?
I don't have a really. I mean, one of the advantages, I believe, what you just said is absolutely true. You need to trust the code, right? But yeah, isn't one of the advantages that these guys put out here? They would probably say yes, and we actually even go out and we make this code public, right? It's open source code. You can everybody can audit it. So if there's a flaw, they pretty much rely on the wisdom of the crowds, to correct this if something's wrong, and I think this is not a bad argument, by the way.
Yeah. That's absolutely correct. And I think the hope here is that each failure makes the wisdom of the crowd better off. Now, does that happen? I don't know. Will it make us infinitely better off? I don't know. But it's that's the hope, that every time a failure happens, we can fix the code, and the next failure happens, we can fix the code. At least we don't have to trust FTX or an institution again, and I can just go around transacting with these vending machines. Now, I think Peter mentioned the tax argument earlier. Those things this new innovation comes with new problems, right? There's no customer service you can call. Like if something goes wrong, a bank helps you reset your password. Hopefully they get you your money back. Not all the time, but there's at least some hope. In a smart contract in these decentralized finance worlds, and I've been in the situation a handful of times where I send a transaction and it just goes into this black box. I don't know what happened. There's nobody I can call. I just have to do my own Googling of like maybe go cry in a fetus position or something. But that definitely does happen. You can't. The downside to this is that you are gaining control, maybe too much control for most people, on where your money is going and what's happening with it. If it goes haywire, and this is another opportunity for scams for people. If your friend convinces you to go buy, I don't know, 100 Philo coins or something, and they don't know what they're talking about because they copied the code. I'm talking about myself here, because they copied the code from a website or something. You know, there's nobody you can blame. You just have to be like, dude, I trusted you and you broke my trust, and now we're both broke. That's totally a situation that can happen. And those are new problems that don't exist, or maybe they existed early on in the centralized finance world, but we've kind of gotten past them. All right, so I talked briefly about, I'm almost done, by the way. So I'll talk briefly about how it's transforming identity. It's quite the literal transformation. It's not like going to live in Minecraft or something. It's altering ownership, because the receipt now is between not an institution and you, it's between the network and you directly. It comes with upsides and downsides. And then because you are a root user of the network, and the network has inherent value because of the economic incentives built in, you can just go play money Legos on your own. Nobody's stopping you to do it. That's both good and bad. There's people that are asking for regulation in this, and I think I'm on the side, weirdly, that is good, okay with regulation. I don't see regulation as being restrictive. If anything, I'm of the same opinion when it comes to AI. There should be somebody that's at least thinking deeply about what this innovation means for a large chunk of society. I mean, everybody's not, I'm being sarcastic here, but everybody's not wise like me, right? If you give them this power, they're not going to be watchful. And I'm barely watchful, but you have to know that this is a huge jump, and it's like giving everybody, this is like going from a public transport system to giving everybody a Tesla. Bad things will happen, right? Everybody can just go drive, and everybody can just do things. And both sides, people are allowed to sell anything they want in these decentralized finance markets, and then people are allowed to buy anything they want. That's one big reason why there's all these coins. People are like, buy my coin, and they convince, and there's no argument other than the next person has to buy the coin. That's the only argument. And if that's your game, then, you know, this is a 24/7 casino. So, okay, everything I just said, you must be thinking, or if not, I'm putting this in your head. Yeah, okay, whatever. Why should I care? And excellent question. If you don't have to worry about it, don't worry about it. That's my assumption. If this interests you, it's open and anybody can just go check it out. And I suggest you start very small and don't put anything in it that you wouldn't worry about, like would be sad about losing. But at the end of the day, crypto is just software. I want to keep, Rudy made an excellent point, right? Crypto is just software. Bitcoin isn't just software. Bitcoin is more than software. Bitcoin is trying to like aim to be the money layer, right? And that means way more than a bunch of people saying we can use technology to make these money Legos, to make these vending machines. The seriousness of the argument changes. So it's just, most of it is just software. Most of it is scams. I don't know if it's worse than philosophy. I want to, you know, dwell on that a little bit, but here's where I shield my NFT. Okay. So I made this picture into an NFT. I can make more, but this is only one. So either you scan this QR code, or you can go to my name, prabrandhawa.com/decafquest. You know, I put a verification badge there. It's $8 USDC. Or, you know, if you don't want to bother with all of that, just give me your address and I'll just send you it. Okay. But this is a fun way to end pragmatically, because all of this stuff is so deep and is so wide and has so many dimensions that it's hard, and it's even stupid for me to say you should go do X. No, you don't listen to me at all. The whole thing is about not listening and not trusting, and you're the root user and you have the access to the blockchain. But here's an analogy I tell people that I talk to about like Bitcoin and stuff. The thing that you want to pay attention to, I'll go back to this Mina Noir email spam example. So let's pretend it's the early 90s and someone is saying, hey, there's this new technology called email. It, just like I'm saying, it, you know, crypto people say it allows you to send money anywhere, da, da, da. Yeah, all that's true. You know, all that's true. And the evolution of that is going to keep happening. But what I insist on my friends and family with, all right, thanks, Shane. Appreciate you being here. But what I insist my friends and family to do is to at least know how to receive it, send it, and log into a website with it. And you don't have to, for you to do that, you don't have to have money, or you don't have to put money into this. A lot of people assume anytime you bring up cryptos that this is like a rich people's toy. Those are like common assumptions, and I'm more than happy to entertain that. And you know, to some degree it is. But what you want to do is you want to be the person in early 90s, and if someone's talking about PowerPoint and email, you don't want to, maybe you want to put money in Microsoft or something. I don't know. I'll leave you to that. But you want to definitely know how to send emails, receive emails, and sign into your email account. That's non-negotiable pretty much. And the rest of it is up to your risk tolerance and how much you're comfortable with. That's my pragmatic advice in the face of all these scams and everything that's happening that's not good for the world. What's for sure is in about 20 years, maybe there'd be a safer way, there'll be a much better way. But this thing is here to stay, and you should at least know how to send it, receive it, because you know, you never know, you'll be in this black swan event type situation where you're like, oh, I wish I had some Bitcoin or something. And in that case, that's not the first time you should be interacting with the technology. So the pragmatic advice I have is interact with it for free, learn how to send it, receive it, and buy my NFT. Look how awesome it is. I spent an entirety of like 5 minutes on it.
It's a fancy bridge.
Thanks.
Behind the CAF Quest. The other thing that I would add to anybody who perhaps hasn't started is get a hardware wallet.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of perhaps the learning process, but it's important just to say, you know, like, part of the reason this is happening is not relying on a centralized institution that's a scam, and for self-sovereignty and custody of what you own, regardless of what it is. But, you know, buy it directly from the vendor website, you know, Ledger, Trezor, easy to find, but in the spirit of security and sovereignty, that's a big part of the learning experience. Yeah,
I think you have to, like, kind of the way it's set up in most places, you kind of have to depend on some centralized entity like a bank or a crypto.com and Coinbase, or unfortunately some of them turn out to be FTX. But the I think wise thing to do is exactly what you said. Like once you're done depending on them for the initial transaction, and now you have Bitcoin in your possession, the wise thing to do is now make a wallet of your own. Hashtag download MetaMask or get Rainbow, one of those things. The best ideal would be what Peter just said, a hardware wallet. But it's also, I also understand that it's a transition for some people. It sure was for me. For the longest time I didn't have one. I didn't even have enough crypto to like put in the hardware wallet. But I definitely am one of those people now that thinks that needs to happen. Yeah. Oh, you're discussing the sovereign individual? Nice.
Tomorrow, yeah.
What does your business do? All right, Leo, hey, I run one of those, I run these generals for Ethereum and Bitcoin. I don't mind Bitcoin. I run it as a node. So I keep a copy of Bitcoin. I keep a copy of Ethereum. I run a bunch of validators. I mentioned this earlier in my introduction. I'm an outsider to technology. I'm learning to code. So what I really want to do, I see the Ethereum part of it, especially somewhat of a comparison to JavaScript. So my business, what it does now is run Bitcoin nodes and Ethereum nodes, but that's in my hopes of being able to code and somehow make my own apps, because it makes me jealous. The whole iPhone revolution passed me by, and the people that, even though the apps didn't work out, I'm jealous of the people that learned how to make apps back then. And so now I'm like, this is happening, and even if my apps don't work out, I should at least learn how to make a wonky app. And because 10 years later, I won't be jealous of the people again, because I'm not going to have it happen to me a second time, Cool. What else?
Okay, so one thing I started thinking about during your talk is some people mentioned coordination a couple of times, and that's actually a concept that lately I find interesting. I'm still not sure whether it's actually a really interesting concept or whether it's just such a general concept that it seems interesting. But I can imagine that since coordination is can be useful at a lot of different levels, also outside of the economy, there could be like non-economic applications of this coordination that crypto offers. And I was wondering, do you see any possibilities outside of like money and NFTs and stuff like that for crypto?
Yeah, there's some. I mean, I don't know how promising they are. I'm trying to look for the slide where I said what crypto isn't. Okay. When I said it's not all out socialism, those are the type of goods I was thinking. I'll give you an overview of a couple of them I know. There's this thing in Ethereum called public goods funding, and it's all kind of indirectly still monetary because it can't get away from tokens. The main innovation here is that you're promising the network some tokens to run the network and keep the network secure. But the idea of public goods is that you can make something that it's like an open source philosophy that everybody else can use once you've made it, but you can not only fund it by the public, which isn't a new idea, but the idea that's new here is that you can retrospectively fund it. So once something takes off, because it's on chain and everybody can just see which wallet made it, who owns that wallet, there's mechanisms to retrospectively fund it. So that's one. There's another one where people are making, I heard of, there's called Prab Randhawa or something. I was listening to a podcast where what he's doing is, and it's still, there's money that's part of it, but that's not what their vision and intention is. And a DAO, for everybody listening, is a decentralized autonomous organization. That's one of the big use cases coming out of Ethereum, that because there's money Legos and these smart contracts, and you can make an entire organization just made up of these vending machine logics, and it just runs itself without having a CEO, a C-suite, and a traditional corporate sense. But the Prab Randhawa example I'm mentioning, this guy, his vision was to have everybody come together, pool in money, and then stake the money. So the money is being lent and it's gaining interest, but the interest it's gaining isn't going back to the people that originally put in the money. The interest that the money is gaining is being, again, used for a public goods, a social good type scenario. So I think the main takeaway for me, at least, is that if someone has a non-monetary use case where it's solely for coordination, as you mentioned, it's possible. Will it work in the long run? Of course, it's working in the short term right now. If people are putting their money together and the interest they gain, they go do stuff with it in the public sphere. I don't know if it's going to work in the long run, because the tokenization is so like a deep inherent part of it. So like that mathematical, economical part of it cannot be detached. And so it's hard to say if it's going to see a place where it's a non-monetary use case, and people are trying to think about that, of how to do coordination without the tokens. But I haven't seen a use case so far.
Yeah, I can imagine it. It will be really hard to get away from the incentivizing thing, because I guess, as you said, without the incentives, like you do not have the guarantee, right? Then you're back at the Byzantine generals problems, actually.
Right.
If I understand the question correctly too, I do see applications around use of tokens and NFTs as it relates to high value items where provenance is of importance, right? If you look at how much Parmesan cheese gets stolen every year, and right, and there's fake cheese that's flooding the market, or wine.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there are wine companies now that issue an NFT that will tell you the story of the grapes when they were planted, and I don't know, there's all sorts of real crazy. I mean, I think that's to your point, Prab. I mean, we're in this era where we have no idea where it's going to go, and it's so early, and it's so interesting, and it's so vague. But nonetheless, if I understand the question correctly, I mean, there are use cases where it's not primarily financial and a tradable asset.
Yeah. Yeah. Supply chain. Yeah. You just mentioned a supply chain use case. That's definitely one. Yeah.
Yep.
That's where I like to bring up Telmo again, because we were discussing on Discord of what's the application and use case, which is something Nassim Taleb also, questions in his paper. And to Peter's point, it's so early that I think a wise thing to do would be comfortable with the fact that we just don't know, like we didn't with the internet. People had so many different expectations out of the internet, and something out of the left field comes in, and nobody expected it, and it just takes off. Like NFTs were like that to me. Till last year, they just got in, and it went from being something super like meaningless and stupid to all this money into it, and now we're back at, is it stupid? Maybe it is.
But I think some of it too is like what we haven't even talked about, gold, right? And so in the traditional world, right, gold is an $11 trillion asset. Art in the traditional market is a $1.7 trillion asset class. I mean, like, why does art have value? I mean, gold more than anything, right? Gold only has value because we've accepted it to have value, and it's relatively supposedly finite, although that's not true, and just has withstood the test of a belief system of value over a long period of time. And man, could you imagine kids hauling gold around? Ain't gonna happen. To that Black Swan event, I mean, like, who's rocking gold? You better have some coat on you.
I mean, if you're Peter Schiff, or like, there's people that are like pro gold, and they're with this whole crypto stuff, and they're saying, yeah, I'm with it, but I want it as a representation of gold. I don't want it as a representation of Bitcoin. And that's one thing that I was thinking about it. This is such a vast topic that I had to like do my own wrestling exercise inside my head. And that's what I was going with it early on, where this was good for me. And it's not just like something I'm doing out of good faith or something. It's good for me because I had to pick which parts of it to talk about, because I'm sure there's like the gold aspect we could go into, and I'm sure there's others here that are listening either now or later on that have an entirety of why this is an important technology. And I said none of that today, and that's totally possible. And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. So if Ann Albert or Peter or anybody else listening, you should, I'm shilling in on behalf of Decaf Quest, but you should do a marketplace discussion. Just come in and like talk to us and tell me what else makes this interesting or not interesting. You can come in and just like, I don't know, talk trash about it for an hour. I'll still listen.
You guys are welcome. Just let me know.
I might take you up on that, because NFTs to me are just fascinating for a wide variety of reasons. Much less the creator economy that is helping unfold. So
one cool use case, and this is only one NFT, and if anybody has their Ethereum or wallet address on hand, I'm happy to make more and send you them. So send me the address or put it in the Discord or something. But one NFT use case that I think is fascinating is, so I think we were exchanging emails one day, Decaf Quest and I'm big on the .eth domains. You probably see them on Twitter all over. So I was like, just, I don't know, thinking about it, and I was like, this Decaf. I was in that zone thanks to I hope I'm forgetting the gentleman's name. the domain first developer.
Peter.
Peter,
Askew.
yes. Peter Askew, there you go. So I'm in my Peter Askew era where I think of good ideas and like I hop on to either google.com or these ENS domain things to see if they're available. So I was talking to Decaf Quest and I got the decafquest.eth domain, but what's one thing that's really different about these .eth domains, which kind of blows my mind, is so let's say there's I think your page on Gumroad is decafquest.gumroad.com, okay? And Gumroad's awesome. Like it's probably one of the best startups that I've had the pleasure of learning more about. But decafquest.gumroad.com is still part of Gumroad, right? But with the legification of these Ethereum blockchain things, decafquest.eth could be its own NFT, and I still own it because I haven't sent it to Decaf because he won't make a MetaMask account. But if there was a subdomain called peter.decafquest.eth, that could be an independent entity and an independent NFT outside of the control of decafquest.eth. So that's an example of a smart contract. That's a one-way action. You'd have to think about doing that. But if you say prab.decafquest.eth, you have the option to give it to me in a way that you can't take back, and you have no more powers over it, and it's just mine. So that's like it enables minor changes like that, and NFTs to me are going to keep pushing for minor things, and people are going to keep hyping it up, and there's going to be other things that people do, and investors are going to pump in $1 billion in that. One of the NFT use cases that I think is better is a better use case than monkey pictures and just buying pictures for $500,000 is like if you prove, you know how people have smart locks in their houses and they're smart locks and they open with an app or something today, but people are online posting about if you prove ownership to an NFT, that's the only time you can open a door lock, or a set of the X list of the NFTs can open doors. And there's the difference here again is that there's no middle party. It's just you, your signature, and the door. So I foresee a lot more of that happening, and I don't know what it is going to be like, but NFTs definitely interest me. So if that's what you're into, Peter, you should totally talk about it, and I'll sign up. Yep. You're on mute.
Funny, because what you just touched upon, right? I think people talk a lot about utilities in NFTs. And as most people say, buy what you like, that it's a form of art that you might have in your house that you're going to hold for a long period of time with little expectation. To your point on whether you purchase crypto, like buy the NFT without an expectation of return, which is easier said than done. But I think it does there's some really interesting things with art that, to your point, right, there's they create in some form almost an optionality with no idea of where it might lead and what might happen, right? And to your point on the monkey JPEGs, those guys are now talking about opening up a real life club in Miami that you're going to get access to by virtue of having a monkey JPEG.
Yes.
So I just think it all reinforces your point previously, like this is the biggest, most interesting possible thing going on with so much promise and so much scam, and we don't know where it goes. It does pay to get in early anyway and just participate. Get a MetaMask wallet.
Yeah. I love that. See, it's a scam and a Ponzi in the same way as philosophy, because it pushes you in a rabbit hole. With one thing I've noticed, I'm not a veteran philosophy person. Okay, I quit my job last year. That's the first time I even paid attention to philosophy, and I'm like forever thankful that I'm now in a better place than I was last year. So I'm like early. Same with physics. I don't study physics a lot before I showed up here, but I think one thing I've noticed both philosophy and physics do is they make you wonder: are you really sure about what you're sure about? And And crypto does the same thing. You could be like, yep, Bitcoin isn't money. And then it's like, well, do you know what's money? And then you have this blue screen of death experience, And with NFTs, you could be like, oh, these monkey JPEGs isn't art. And then the next person is like, what is art? And you're like, whoa, man. You have the same like rabbit hole experience as oh shit, I'm not sure about what I thought I was sure about. So NFTs do the same thing with art, I think.
Well, I think that's the beauty of crypto. It lays the biggest thing possible, our economy. It lays it bare, to your point, that nobody knows.
Yeah. And a lot
Although
of that
there is software that you can see and know it works the way it's supposed to relative to Bitcoin, but
yeah. That's why it's like not to use the Twitter term Lindy, but it's Lindy in that every concept you bring up here, you can trace back to like hundreds and thousands of years, and that's what makes it like an infinitely deep argument, because people just split into the school of thought, or as Philippe would say, paradigm. People just slip into their paradigm, and you can develop ground up logic from whichever paradigm you're in, and it'll just be a for or an against argument about something that's been going on for like 1,000 years. And so you end up learning nothing. So I hope people listening at least learn a thing or two, or maybe not, and that's okay too.
Yep. Yeah. The two questions I start with normies more often than not is right. The first one's rhetorical. Is the future more software or less software?
Interesting.
Right. Easy. So then, do you want to live in a more decentralized or centralized world? Because if your money is controlled and owned by the government in a way, right, the next level is taking all this paper out of the system, and what China's doing for starters. I mean,
Yeah.
you're going to be wholly beholden to a government.
Yeah. I've been complexity pilled, and I think I saw Barry is gonna come and do hopefully one of these marketplace discussions, because complexity is wild. I want to like zoom in on the question that you just asked. The software piece I don't have a problem with, but the second question is, given that there's going to be more and more software, do you want to live in the decentralized world or a centralized world? And I think what complexity opened my eyes to is that before looking into that from a serious angle, I was maybe the type of guy that would say the answer is always decentralized. But then complexity is scale pilled me, and in that sense, like, if it depends on what, now my new answer is, it depends on which scale you're talking about, like, right, within the context of, and that's like self, family, town, village, city, state, government, federal. So in a sense of the family, you don't want, and this is my new opinion, I was arguing over Thanksgiving with a friend over this, that inside of a house, you don't want 4 libertarians absolutely at it against each other. There has to be some cohesion, right? So inside of a household, I'd rather it be centralized, at least to some degree. And I don't want to live inside a house where everybody is just free for all, like a Call of Duty game. But maybe that does make sense at the federal level. And so I'm pointing out the concept of multi-scale variety. And maybe that itself is something we could ask Barry about. Yeah. Rudy, go.
No, that's all very interesting discussion. I just thought, centralization doesn't mean today what it used to mean, right?
Yeah.
When we talk about centralization, because of globalization, centralization is so much more centralized on a complete different scale than it was 30, 40 years ago. And I believe that centralization comes with, I'm pretty much, also a decentralized guy in general, but it can be misused on both ways, right? That's pretty much what it is. I think this whole crypto or blockchain question rises and falls with the trust in institutions altogether. So when you look at the current inflation rates, and you could say, yes, that's because of the Russian-Ukrainian war, or you could say it's because of quantitative easing. My understanding is Bernanke just got a Nobel Prize for this, right? Idea to unlimited debt. So this is something that's probably not even at the forefront of the public discussion, right? So a lot of stuff happens, and we are then confronted with the results of this years later sometimes. And one of the things that I found very interesting, especially the Bitcoin guys, are very much aligned with the Austrian economists. The Austrian economists, like 100 years ago, are pretty much, what they said is, don't trust institutions. Whenever a government, thinkers with economy, it's probably bad. Not immediately, but so that was very, very different what the Keynesian said, right? And I think what you will see is this: if you can trust the money stability, then obviously nobody will care about something like Bitcoin or crypto. If you can trust what you just said, the Parmesan cheese, which I didn't even know, that every single piece of cheese is really from Parma, and it's it's worth it. I mean, I once heard, that even the fish that they serve in fancy restaurants is probably the fish that you actually paid for, because there's not. And the same thing is in champagne. If you trust, if you trust a trusting person, in all kind of things, then probably crypto is not even interesting for you as a concept.
Yeah.
But this whole thing. And look, I just want to also say just one thing. When we talk about the scams, when you just look at the newspapers, then obviously, crypto is a marketplace for what do you call it? Ponzi schemers or those kind of things. Yeah. There's just a difference, right, between one thing. If you, I like what I think Harry said. With this, the exchanges are exchanges. That's fine. They're market makers exchanges. But the second thing is, do you keep actually your coins there? Because that's almost like an oxymoron. You now have a decentralized currency that you store at a centralized place, right? Which obviously you can avoid with having a hard wallet somewhere. Anyway, so I really think crypto will. That's my point, I guess. Crypto altogether and blockchain technologies and decentralization as it will probably. This topic will be kept alive for a long time, as people lose trust in institutions. I guess that's my point.
Yeah. By the way, Rudy, I think you're another person that I'm curious about your opinions, just as the one you mentioned, not just on physics, but on crypto, because you mentioned it previously, and I could probably listen to you for an hour if you have an hour. So you should also do a marketplace discussion, because what you just said is so important, but there's so much more to it. You just gave us a very compressed version, and you're right. There's a distrust in institutions, and that's the natural type of person that goes into crypto. And then there's the type of person who never questions it or has tons of interest or trust in the institutions, and they don't see the point of it, right? They don't see the difference between like a centralized exchange, like you just mentioned, or a decentralized exchange. I have friends like that, and they don't get the point of it, or they're like, I'm into crypto, and what they mean by that is like they just have money in an exchange somewhere. But I'm curious about what you just said more.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the obvious two examples are this, right? If you have something like Bitcoin, and you can peer-to-peer, payments, no middleman in between, and also not inflationary, all those kind of stuff is great. But then people come in, with the other, and that's all very good arguments. So nobody can trace, money anymore, completely, a personalized way. So everything is, because obviously Bitcoin doesn't really, if you have the key, you're the owner, right? So it cannot be traced back to an identity pretty much. I think you mentioned this before. But then you obviously, then you talk about child trafficking or drug money laundering, all those kind of things. There's obviously possible, right? And this is always the counter argument. And yes, that is true, right? The question is just, that's what I say, the trust on both sides. If you want to have this big entity in the middle, let's say central banks that are responsible for and by the way, this is also a very interesting topic, probably for another discussion, right? What do central banks do with crypto right now? Very interesting, things that they have actually in mind. I think the extreme. I think Harry mentioned China, but think about what the European Union does, or the Indian government. These are just, prototypes right now with crypto, where they say, okay, so every token, every dollar, every euro that you have has a blockchain attached, and that tells us the history of how it was spent in its entire lifespan, but not in
sounds like 1984. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So, and then they can actually even build in, there are some nice features of this government-issued cryptocurrencies. They can actually build in inflation. If you don't spend it, it loses value automatically, right? Those kind of things. This is brand new world. And obviously, yes, if you can actually do this from a government point of view, you can obviously, boost consumption, right? If you get if your salary is 100% only for the first month, and then it actually depreciates in value, you better spend your income, quite fast. So they can actually, yes, remote control the economy. But is this really the stuff? Is this really the society that we want to live in? Where people actually, that's really the question altogether. I don't think, it's, by the way, it's restricted to China. I understand, they are probably the most advanced here, but it's happening also in the West.
Yeah. And to some extent, it's like these, it's not to say you can pick one particular example. These examples, you can keep going back in time and you keep seeing parallels of, like, when this whole Tornado Cash thing happened. For everybody else, I'll summarize it. What it enabled people to do, Tornado Cash is a protocol. It's one of those vending machines that I mentioned. And what it enabled people to do is make their money anonymous. And you can imagine what a field day terrorists had with that. So when Tornado Cash got banned, my dad called me. He's like, "Hey, I heard North Korea was into the same thing you were into." And that also happened when the internet, I just mentioned buying a t-shirt for the first time on the internet in the 90s. And that was the end result of encryption. But when encryption first came about, the government banned it and they had a point. They have a right point. Like, you're telling me I can send you a message and nobody, including the government, nobody can see it. And you're telling me the terrorists are not going to use it. You're telling me North Korea is not going to use it. And the true answer is they're probably going to use it. That's the true answer. And right now, the Tornado Cash thing, if you're telling me that there's this peer-to-peer money, if you really go into the dark side of it, the really, really terrible things in the world, terrorists, child pornography, you can just, name it. You really think if you let people just like send each other money, those people aren't going to use it? And the true answer is, of course, they're going to use it. They're probably going to be the first people to use it, and so there's a very thin line to be like, how do we find a balance? But in the past, I love mentioning crypto as encryption because we got past it. Somehow we got past it. Does that mean it's going to be an equally good answer this time? It's not. I make it sound very casual buying a t-shirt on the internet. Hopefully it can become as casual. But because we don't know, we're like heading into this Wild West, which is an analogy a lot of crypto people make. They compare it to the West. Back in the day, you're going to the West and there's going to be people out there for you. Nobody's going to be surprised if you got scammed, robbed. You won't have a customer service to call. In that sense, where we haven't seen what the end of it looks like, who's to say that it's going to play out the same as encryption and buying t-shirts on the internet, right? It could be way worse. And so we're good to like stop and pause and have these discussions. And that's why I was like, part of me initially was like, man, this is the worst time to be coming on these market discussions and talk about crypto. Everybody's going to be like, oh, you're just like the FTX guy. But then the echo in me was like, actually, this is the best time, because this is the time people should be talking about it and learning about it. So hopefully we don't have many more FTXs. I know there's going to be more for sure. Hopefully not many more.
But by the way, those FTXs happen in the old world too, right?
Yeah.
WorldCom,
Yeah.
Enron, Washington Mutual, United States government. I mean, the lion economy of the world with the federal, with our reserve currency. I mean, look at our debt. Look at our debt. So we've never had no reason not to trust, because money just shows up. We print more. So it sure feels like a reckoning is coming that we papered over in 2001, and then we did it in 2008. And there is right the same.
That's exactly what I feel too, Peter. Exactly, that's what I believe too. It is actually something that was brewing for a long time. And now people are actually looking for solutions, and obviously governments won't like it. So that's also what almost my knee-jerk reaction to all this kind of discussions about crypto. Every time there's a crypto crash, it's bad news. But there's also, look, one of the things is clear, right? If Bitcoin becomes much bigger than it is right now, this is definitely a threat to all financial policy around the world. So that's just one of the obvious things. That's why I always believed, the bigger it becomes, the more opposition it will attract. That's just natural. Has to be. And I'm not
Yeah.
even sure, by the way, if a Bitcoin-based economy would be good for us, because it means that the government can do nothing if something happens. I mean, I'm not even sure, if this is actually, I do understand that they misuse their powers very often, but to be completely powerless if there's a global depression is probably also not
Yeah.
desirable.
I do think some of where we talked about not knowing where we go, though, and we talked right about a radical extreme of decentralization. I suspect we end somewhere where there's a happy medium. I mean, use an example of, right, if you were a large enough investor today, Fidelity and Bank of New York will hold your Bitcoin and Ethereum in custody, right? I mean, Bank of New York is an OG in the United States banking world. So the fact that somebody big enough could access the custody of Bank of New York is an example of that. I think some form of a happy medium of holding a decentralized store value, whatever you want to call it, software in a centralized institution will, I think, bring a lot of more comfort and regulation, of course.
Yeah.